So welcome. So what does it mean? What does it mean? Why would I play that song? What does it mean to have a higher love? What does it mean? Tell me in the chat. What does that mean? Why does that feel so fucking good to remember and to connect with that? What is that? We all know what that is. We know what that is. Yeah, it's self-love. It's a connection with like that true self. It's a connection with God. It's a connection with the divine. It's a connection with the flow. It's a connection with the infinite field of all things that are really what's here, what we're all vibing off of. It's that higher love. It's not being in fear. It's not being in doubt. It's not trying to control things, right? I heard Glennon Doyle once say, like, you have a choice. You can either control someone or love them, but you can't do both. And it's the same thing with your life, right? You either get to be in love with your life or try to control it. You get to choose. So fear is control because fear wants to predict. But when you are in love, you let go, right? And it's that adage, that age-old adage, like, if you love someone, let it go. If it's yours, it comes back, right? When somebody's controlling and needs reassurance and is constantly trying to predict or defend against or understand or get, it's like that messes up anything, messes up a business, it messes up your podcast. But when you let go and you just come from this place of, this in and of itself is the ROI. I'm enjoying this. I'm learning. I'm calling myself to the table. I'm seeing new possibilities. And remember that there's a reason that we do hard things. We want to grow. And because we're growing, by definition, we're stretching ourselves. So you're stretching yourself. You're stretching yourself to see further than you could see. You're stretching yourself to show up more than you showed up. You're stretching yourself to set down the need to do things perfectly. You're stretching yourself in a lot of ways. That's not supposed to feel good. Nobody is eating chocolate cake during a workout. They're not, right? No one's sitting there feeling comfortable and eating chocolate cake on a treadmill. They don't go together. And the satisfaction of the workout is you pushed your edge. You fucking pushed your edge. And that's what you're doing right now. You're pushing all kinds of edges. You're pushing the possibility of your own belief. You're pushing who you think you are. You're pushing showing up, being visible and sharing your voice and all the monkey mind stuff that comes with that. It's not supposed to feel comfortable like eating chocolate cake and sitting and watching a movie. Not the feeling you're going for right now. Different feeling of satisfaction, right? Different feeling. This is the task at the moment, right? This is what we're signing up for because the reward is actually greater, because there's nothing like the feeling of being proud of yourself. That's a much better feeling than enjoying the good movie. Even if the good movie is great and even if the Twizzlers are perfect, there's nothing that replaces the feeling of, here I am in my own self-agency, finding more authority in my being, walking back home to myself, finding new neural pathways of new possibility, of new strength. So let's talk about amazing Chris. That was going to be my first question today. Chris recorded her first episode. Tell me where you're at. How many of you have recorded an episode already? How many of you have yet to do that? That's fine. You don't need to put pressure on yourself, but we just want to check in, just notice, and just notice if there's anything to notice about that. Maybe you can notice the truth is I'm still in my own way about it. Or the truth is I've been overthinking what it's about or whatever it is. But I would say, even if you're going to record an episode and I say to you something like, go record a bad episode, then I would do that. Because by recording a bad episode and telling yourself, this is bad, this is just like it's like at sound check when people just sing the ABCs. It's like, just go do it, right? Just do a bad episode. There could be a lot of gains in that. So I'm going to share my screen just to do a little review of a couple things. And then we're going to talk about a few more pieces, but I don't want them to overwhelm you, because there's just never an end to what we can learn, right? But what we learn and what we implement, it's different, right? Like, how much do you really implement from what you learn? Usually you learn this much, right? And you implement this much. And so instead of trying to even decide that you're going to implement everything I'm telling you, you're just going to take in what you can. I think of it like when I was in second grade and the teacher would say to get glue and draw my name and then dump a lot of glitter on it. And then you would shake off the glitter, and what would be left was, just where your name was. That's kind of how learning is. You're just dumping a lot on there, but in the end, there's only a certain amount that sticks. But I think if we know that and we anticipate that, we don't feel as overwhelmed. We're just like, whatever I get, I get. Whatever I'm willing to understand, whatever my capacity is in this moment, I'll get it. And that'll be enough to give me the edge, because that's as much as I could get right now. And you'll have this for a lifetime to keep going back to it. And then you'll think you got something, but a year from now, you'll be doing something. You'll go, I think I finally just got how that actually plays out. But now that I'm doing it, I actually know what I'm doing. I remember Jenna Fisher saying to me that when they were filming The Office, it was like 7 episodes in where they all were like, oh my God, I think we now know what we're actually filming. Like, I think we now understand what The Office is, because the first 7 full episodes, we were just figuring out. She said they were building the engine while they were flying the plane. All of a sudden they were like, I think we have a plane. I think we have wings. I think we have air. I think we know what we're making. But they were finding their voice, finding their fit, figuring it out. So it wouldn't have mattered if they were given all this extra detail on branding and camera work. It was like they were just first finding the story. They were finding the voicings. They were figuring out what the show was really about, right? So this is the way it goes, is you're figuring it out as you go. And that is how it always is. And then you go, I think we're actually making this. This is what I think we're actually making. And that's an amazing feeling. So I'm going to share my screen on this one. Okay, so hang on, let me share my screen. Here we go. Okay, so can you guys see this? Okay, so let's just review creating your podcast. So of course it's an exciting time because you're in the learning curve, and there's something so stimulating about that. Let's talk about what we're really setting ourselves up to do, right? You want to have episodes ahead of time so that you don't scramble, right? Which is why I said to you that I started recording in October and my podcast came out in January, so that I wasn't scrambling. It's one of those things you don't necessarily always think about, but if you started your podcast today and put it out and you didn't have any shows in the queue, you'd have to hurry up by the end of the week to get one recorded and to post it. And then you'd always be playing catch up. But if you give yourself 6 to 8 weeks of a runway and you go record 10 episodes, then when your podcast comes out, you don't have to rush. You can be recording things, but you already have several weeks going on. So that's something nice to think about. So the guest, we talked about this with Scout. Pitching people is a great thing to do. And it doesn't matter if they don't have to be the thought leader. They don't have to be famous, but it's an interesting thing. She said, if you remember, people come for the guest, but they stay for you. And so just thinking about selecting guests that resonate with your audience. And it's really about the message, right? Like for me, I was talking to someone this morning who works with women in their early to mid 40s on like perimenopause. And I was like, it doesn't matter to me how many followers this woman has. It matters that it's like the topic is interesting, because so many of the women in my audience might want to know about all those hormonal changes. Like I just posted today, why is it that for 2.5 years, I'm 44. So like, it's been like 2.5 years that I get scared all the time, because I'm like, why do I have like pain moving around my boobs? And then like, I go to the doctor and he's like, I think it's hormones. You're getting older. I'm like, thanks. When does that go away? And he's like, it doesn't. And he's like, but don't drink coffee. That doesn't help. And I'm like, no problem. Sure. And I'm like drinking all the coffee in the world. And so, I, of course, like made an appointment to have a mammogram on Monday, but it's like these topics, it matters. If it matters to you, it matters to someone, is my point. It doesn't matter that this person I was just talking to, it doesn't matter to me if she has a best-selling book. It doesn't matter to me if she has 100,000 followers. It matters that she's really helpful at talking about that topic because, and also, the other day I was talking to a woman who's at my daughter's school. She's a mom of one of the kids, and she was helpful with helping me acclimate my daughter, who we were new last year to the school. And I was like, this is a good topic where we can be two moms talking about how to handle girls, when they're 10 or 11, and what are the ways to have them like lean into what's uncomfortable and make play dates and have to overcome themselves because it's a tough age. And it was such a candid conversation. I was like, I want to have you on the show because it's the stickiness of the conversation. Okay. So it doesn't have to be that the person is famous. And creating questions based on your guest's interests and needs. People want to feel seen, right? So that's the best thing ever. And when you make people feel seen who you're interviewing, they're going to post about the show. It won't matter to them how many downloads you have. They'll be like, I have been on so many different kinds of things, but when I was sitting with this girl, I felt so seen. So I want to help promote you. And that's a really beautiful thing, which can help your career quite a bit. Even if that person only has 316 followers, if they have an engaged audience and 115 of those people see it and follow you, that will matter, right? So you want to just kind of peruse like who your guest is and what they care about and what they talk about, and feel free, sometimes people, for the fun of it, create like a segment where they'll have a rapid fire section at the end where they'll be like, okay, rapid fire, what's your favorite television indulgence? Rapid fire, if you can go spend the day anywhere, where would you go? Rapid fire, what's your favorite 80s rom-com? Those are kind of fun things because they disarm the conversation and they make the person get out of their like expert mode and just kind of be human. And so being silly like that can be helpful. And one thing that we do on my podcast that listeners seem to love is we take the takeaways from the expert. Like we'll go back and highlight, all right, these are the things that really felt like they mattered. And another thing that you can do once you get more like savvy is right after you record the episode, like when you're in the energy of it and you get off your Zoom call, you could go and record a 1-minute video live on your Instagram stories and say, I just interviewed so-and-so and I'm so lit up and I'm so excited for you guys to hear this. It's coming soon. And here's the thing that we talked about that mattered the most to me. Those are like fun kind of things to do once you're in the rhythm. Helping your guests feel seen right away is so important. Like whenever people come on, I assume that whether they're fancy people or they're not so fancy, I want them to just feel like I've got them, So before we even start, I'm like creating that energy. I'm like, hey, it's so nice to meet you. Welcome. You sound good. You look good. How are you feeling? And then what I normally do is I'll say, I want you to know who's listening to this. My audience is women between the ages of this and this. And even if you don't yet have an audience, you are you. So basically that just grounds them and they have a sense of you being in your authority. Like, this is who my audience is, just so you know. So every time someone comes on, I'm like, hey, my audience is women between this age and this age. And they're all, they're the kind of people who they work on themselves and they strive for purpose, and they're going to love what you have to say. So I tell them all ahead of time, they're going to love what you have to say. They're your kind of people. I'm so excited. And then they're like, oh, and it reminds them like there are people listening, not just like a vagueness of a blackness out there. It's like there are people listening and I want to serve those people. And I think that that's a nice thing to do. So you don't have to obsess, right, about the tech or the editing. I know that there's no end to how crazy that can make us feel because there's so much to it. And there's so many bells and whistles you can add. And as I said on our call with Scout, because your first 50 episodes are never going to be your favorite 50 episodes, I said, I'm always looking back and I'm always reminding myself that when I start something, I always feel like, gosh, I wish I had 1 million listeners right now. And then I'm like, Thank goodness I didn't have 1 million listeners for the first 10 episodes, because those were not my best 10 episodes. So I'm glad that it grows with you. And that being the case, I would just put your shows out. I think it's charming, and I think it adds authenticity if it's not overly edited and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm not yet fancy enough to edit it. So you're saying on the podcast, all right, so let's go back. Let's say that again. It actually adds like character and sweetness. And for the first 10 episodes, if you only have 96 listeners, or you only have, 1,004 listeners, they can handle it. They're growing along with you. In fact, that makes you more charming and more authentic to say, hey guys, I'm doing this and I'm learning as we go. And that you might hear a door slam, and I don't know how I can go back in and edit that out, but I'm here. I love you guys. Let's go. Like, I'm not going to edit. Scout started her show last time she was on 2 days ago. Her mic wasn't clicked in. I'm not going to cut that. That's what we're going to have. I'm this many episodes in. We for sure know how to edit that. I'm not going to edit that. I love that. I'm happy that happened. And I'm not saying that just to be like in a teaching moment. That's of course what I would do, because I'm always, here's what I'm betting on. The world is so suspicious of things that look too perfect. The world is actually a little nauseated by that. So whenever somebody is trying and they're making things appear perfect, people immediately don't trust you. You now have to work harder to earn their trust, right? One of the reasons why The Office is the #1 show, even now, like even when there's no, The Office is not on TV right now. Even now, when it's not on TV, and even now when there's so much that we could watch, there's no end to what we can watch. It's still the #1 show because Greg Daniels was like, hey, in a world of perfect Barbie looking people, let's put real people on TV. And he made the good call, because it immediately, it signaled in people a sense of trust and lovability and likability and all of that. So really understand that there's a superpower in leaning in to whatever's going on and using that as a benefit right now. So it's about your energy. I'm still recording my intros and outros on my phone to this day. I don't want to be the kind of person who says to my kids, okay, mommy's going into her office and don't talk. It's like, sometimes you hear my kids in the background, or sometimes I'm in the car. I'm like, you guys, I'm coming home. I'm in the car. I couldn't make it home in time. I have a cold. My kids are in the backseat and I'm recording the intro to the podcast. It's like, it's great. Actually, it's fun. It feels real, because it is. Don't be afraid to take a stand. I think so much of what gets in your way is like, well, if I do this episode and I talk about this, what's my uncle going to think? Or if I do this episode, what's my sister going to say? Or what are the people who I work with going to say? It's like, this is huge, right? This is huge. This is your David and Goliath moment. It's like, this is your moment to say, from this point on, I'm choosing an authentic life. And that can be really scary. It's also extremely liberating. It's also what will make people lean toward you, because you have a point of view and you care about certain things. And it feels really good when you just say, it's okay with me if you exit, where you're not trying to control how people think about you, because you never controlled that anyway. People already didn't like you, even when you were trying to be your best. They already talk shit about you at the Christmas party. I guarantee it. They're going to do it again this year, right? We all have a few people who will just think that we're just like toxic or not relatable or annoying forever and always. That will always be the case. So you're surviving it now. You'll always survive it. And your job, thank God, is not to convince people who won't be able to see you how to see you. Your job is only to connect with the people who are really your people to serve. And in a sea of 8 billion people, there's no way on God's green earth that you are everybody's cup of tea. You're just not. There are people who would say, there's no way you could speak to my heart, because you don't know an ounce of what my life is like. They're right. So it's not your job to convince them that they're wrong and they really should listen to you. There is so much to go around. Every day I find out about someone who I've never heard of, who has 17 million followers. And I'm like, I've never heard of that person. God, they have a giant sliver of the world. And I've never heard of them. Right. So if you want to make a beautiful impact and over the next 3 years, create 1,000 super fans, that will bring your business $1 million in revenue. And that's 1,000 people out of 8 billion. And you're doing great. 1,000 super fans is where you want to be. That isn't anywhere close to all the people in the world. And therefore, we want to really deal with the people that you serve. If your whole fan base is going to be second grade math teachers, that's a positive. That's great, right? Let's just talk to second grade math teachers. Forget everybody else. That's going to do you a lot of good. My friend Stacy started her podcast talking to dance studio owners. She made $4 million in 3 years because she's only talking to the people who own dance studios. I don't know anyone who owns a dance studio. I know one person who's a dance teacher. So it's a very small group of people. She's doing great with it. There's a beauty to you really figuring out who you're for and letting the rest of the whole world decide that they don't get it and they're not interested. Perfect. That's exactly how you want it. So that's what this is about. And then it talks about in this workbook, just looking at those imposter syndrome thoughts, like, is anyone going to listen to this? Who am I to offer perspective? Like, who am I to do this? And this feeling like, is anyone going to even listen? I mean, I want you to think about before we had the internet, before there was people with social media accounts, it used to be that if you were a merchant and you had a business, you could ride your horse 100 miles to go speak with one person and see if they wanted to buy your wares, right? And that would be still a day worthwhile in your business. Now, because we make great the enemy of good, we're like, well, if this is greatness over here, then what does it matter that there were 27 people who listened to my entire episode today? 27 people is nothing. Doesn't matter. What does that even mean? When I was working in the music business, Billboard magazine wrote this article about me. And I remember in that article, sometimes they pull out a number and they kind of like make it pop in the article, or they pull out a quote or something and they put it on the side of the page. So they pulled out the number 28 and they said, Cathy Heller has had 28 songs licensed this year from 17 clients, 17 music supervisors. And I remember thinking, yeah, my whole business, the entirety of my business is because there are 17 people in the world, in the whole world, there's 17 people that come to me and say, do you have a song for this episode? Do you have a song for this ad? 17. That was it. That I was able to make $350,000 because 17 people who worked somewhere or somehow in the music business knew who I was and gave me the opportunity to send them songs for things. I'm talking about 8 were at ad agencies, 4 were working on movies, 6 were working on TV shows. That's it. Do you know how many ad agencies there are? Do you know how many I pitched to every single day? There was never an end. I would pitch to all the Leo Burnett's in Chicago and in San Francisco. And then I would look at Young and Rubicam in Milan. I mean, they're in every city, in every big country, all around the world. And there's all these ad agencies doing all these ads. There's never an end, right? And then there's all these shows. And then there's the shows that are, on the other networks besides the big Fox, NBC, ABC. There's like Freeform. And then there Discovery. There was never an end. So there were 17 people. One was like an assistant music supervisor. One was the music supervisor. One was someone who was a producer at an ad agency. There were 17 people. And those 17 people, I knew their birthdays. Those 17 people, I knew where they lived. I knew when there was a storm in the Midwest. So I would reach out to Michelle and see how she was. I made those 17 people my whole world. And those 17 people, we would do lunch. And if I got a ticket to a Lakers game, I would buy a ticket for one of them. Those 17 people were it for me. And what happened? I grew a business from that, right? And I learned a lot and I got tremendous opportunities from that. And then sometimes by the next time I was featured in Variety a year later, I had grown. Those 17 people were more like 33 people. Why? Because those 17 people referred me to some of their friends who also were looking for songwriters, right? So my business grew to about $500,000 a year. And then I started teaching a class to songwriters. And then from that, I started a podcast. But it's fascinating how, because we're so desensitized to humanity, we're like, no one's going to listen. I just put up my podcast and like, yeah, there's 3 people in China who heard it and 5 people in Australia. And it's only a total of like 46 people that heard me. So what good is it? And I'm like, oh my God, you're not getting it. Those are 46 people. Those aren't 46 bots. Those are 46 people. Grow that to 1,000 listeners and you are done. Grow that to 1,000 listeners. So let's reframe the imposter syndrome thoughts. Remember that it's not about being credentialed or skilled. It's about being vulnerable. It's about having just a tiny edge on the topic, a tiny bit of oomph to get that person's blood flowing. Thoughts are not facts. I say this all the time. And if you didn't feel the whisper to share this or to put this in the world, you wouldn't be here. There's some reason why you've seen enough evidence, and you're right, that working in corporate, it's not really a sustainable, scalable, long-term, awesome, viable thing anymore. When really creating your own brand and creating an online business, really there's no end to how scalable and how sustainable that is, because as long as you go live, you're employable, right? You work for yourself. So there's something that's gotten into your system that says, create this, and this will be the crux of the content that you can repurpose. And from here, that authenticity, starts to spread out. So it's worth it, right?